Hi, my name is Sandy Baird, and I'm here with the Vermont Institute of Community and International Involvement, which is VICII. And we have very special guests tonight, and a very special topic to discuss. We are here with guests from the National Council for the Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And they have launched their New England-wide Free Her campaign. And with us tonight are two of those campaign workers for Free Her, the Free Her campaign, as well as guests from the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. The Free Her Vermont campaign is advocating to shut down the Chittenden County Regional Facility and to stop the state's proposal to build a $250 million prison project. The prison industrial complex has perpetuated in this state and across our nation a punitive culture where we have been taught to address acts of harm with more harm. The Free Her campaign hopes to spread awareness and strategize with Vermonters about how we can end incarceration, build up people instead of prisons, isn't that a great idea, and reimagine how we can make our communities thrive. And with us tonight from Vermont are Kalia Livingston from the Free Her Vermont campaign organizer. With us also is Jana Asaf, who is waving to all of us from the Vermont campaign. She's a Vermont campaign organizer. And away from us, but nevertheless with us, is Virginia Douglas, the co-founder and the Basic Income Coordinator at the National Council, and Sashi James, the Director of Reimagining Communities at the National Council. And we're so grateful that all of you are participating in this very important project. With us also, and our production person who's put this together, is Eric Aniero, who will be joining us as moderators as we go along. So,
Yes, thank you, Sandy. And then before we start, I found on the website of National Council a very interesting video which gives us a little background, about the issues that they're tackling and what they want. So if the production is ready, we can start with that video.
No longer will we rely on somebody else telling our stories. We will tell our own.
In recent years, the number of incarcerated women has been growing at an alarming rate.
Women are the fastest growing segment of the prison population. I was one of those women.
I was one of them.
And I was one of them.
Do you know that the United States is responsible for 30%
of the world's female prisoner population,
despite only having 5% of the world's population?
The number of incarcerated women have increased over 700%.
Between 1980 and 2014,
I was one of them.
I was one of them.
I was one of them.
Nearly 3/4 of incarcerated women have children under the age of 18.
Stripping society of its mothers.
The mission of the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls is to end the incarceration of women and girls.
we are strengthening communities and helping keep all families together.
Together, we are creating a space for women's voices to be heard.
Together, we can build momentum to free her.
Free her.
Free her. Free her.
Free her.
Free her.
Free her.
Free her.
Free her.
Free her.
Hashtag free her.
Free her!
Okay, welcome back. With us to begin our conversation is Kalia Livingston and also Jana, and you will introduce the others, right?
Sure, yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much for having us, Sandy and Eric. I really appreciate you taking the time to have us come and talk about our campaign. Once again, my name is Kalia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the Vermont campaign organizers for the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. I found this organization through my legal work, which I have done historically in my young adult years, and through that time really have discovered how horrible the criminal justice system is. I'm also the daughter of a formerly incarcerated person, so I have felt the impact of incarceration generationally, and the challenges that it has brought to my family and myself. So through my legal work, I hope to practice as an attorney someday through movement lawyering and share a little bit more about the work that we have going on. I'll let Jana introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Jana Ossoff. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm also one of the Vermont campaign organizers. So I am born and raised Vermonter, and community organizing has been a passion of mine since I've been very young. My journey started out when I was like a teenager, and I was a peer educator for Planned Parenthood. I was helping get my friends information about contraceptives, bringing them to appointments, and then that escalated in college. I joined the Black Student Union, and like Kalia said, like really learned about the dark history of the United States and how many people are truly oppressed and put down by the systems of violence that we've made here. So that became my passion, and after college, I really put my all into prison abolition. And one of the main reasons why this movement means so much to me is because my pain had been met with punishment so much throughout my life. And that's what has happened to so many young women and girls in jails and prisons today. So we're just trying to change how we define and interact with harm.
Awesome. And I will pass it to Virginia Douglas.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I feel like I'm echoing. Oh, hi, everybody. I'm Virginia Douglas. I am one of the co-founders of the National Council for Incarceration, formerly incarcerated women and girls. What brings me to this work, I am formerly incarcerated woman. I did 17 and a half years in Danbury Federal Prison. And inside of that federal prison, after me doing about 15 years, came our executive director, Andrea James, who is not on the call tonight, but we have to give all props to her for coming through there as a former attorney. And she came through there and seen the dirt that was done to us and how everybody was passing over the women as when when all the uptick was about the Michelle Alexander book came out about the new Jim Crow, and laws was passing through us, and nothing was about women, everything was about men. And so we started our own organization on the yard as figuring out how, when we come home, how we can change the narrative and how we can change things for the women of being incarcerated. And she came home 2 years after. She came home after two years after. She only had 2 years. I had 17. So she came home first, and when she came home, she hit the ground running, and she built this organization, starting with Family for Justice of Healing in Boston, Mass. And as we know, in the federal system, we all come from all over the country, and even international and all over the country and plus international. So we had to be a national organization instead of just an organization in one state. So that's how we landed here. And as for an introduction to Sashi, because I don't want to call her Janisha James, but that's who she is. But introduction to Sashi is my niece that I love so much. You know, she's not just Reimagine of Community, the director of Reimagine the Community. She's also the admin to our executive director, and she's even more than that. She's up and coming, and she's doing a great job. It's helping us run the organization, and I'll pass it over to Sashi.
Thanks. I guess I don't have to do an introduction of myself. Thank you, Sister Virginia, for introducing me. And I'm happy to be in solidarity. And yeah.
Well,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
I just would like one of you to explain what this council is all about, what you're committed to, and why for our audience. And I guess that would be directed to
Virginia.
To Virginia, right?
Yes. I mean, I can start it off, and
okay,
she can take over from there. You know, well, we are a national organization, and our goal is to end incarceration of women and girls. And that has been our goal and is always going to be our goal. And how we're going to end incarceration of women and girls is that we do nothing
Yes.
without our sisters on the inside. So we work from inside out. And how we do that, we work with our sisters from the inside. So as they come out, we help them navigate through our communities. We give our communities what they need in order to thrive and survive. And as the sisters that's on the outside, as keep them from going in, because just Sashi explained to you all, reimagine communities is, if we reimagine our communities, we tend to reimagine our communities and not reimagine prisons. So if we reimagine our communities, we can stop our sisters from going in and reach out and bring them back out. And that's how we can meet in the middle, and that's how we can end incarceration of women and girls. And right now we work from 3 buckets. That would be policy, reimagine community, and campaign. And that's what we do. In policy, we are here to change the policies, change these laws out here, change the narrative, and help and then change the narrative and then reimagine communities, which Sashi is going to break down to y'all. We are here to reimagine our communities and help our people as they coming in and out, as I say, and in our communities and giving our communities what they need. Every state is different, every community is different. So we have to go to every community and every state to see what the people need in that community. And that's how we break down and reimagine our communities from what the people need. And as right now, we are on our national campaign. This is an issue campaign, and the issue is to end incarceration of women and girls. And I'll pass it to Sashi.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And so thank you, Sister Virginia. And thank y'all for having us here. And I wish I was in Vermont with y'all. It sucks I have to be on Zoom. But I heard it's real cold there, so I guess I'm not that upset about it. But we do, like Sister Virginia said, we do work from 3 buckets, which is policy, reimagining communities, and the Free Her campaign. I want to just uplift some of the policy that we are working on that we will be bringing also to Vermont, which is the moratorium bill, which is a really powerful bill. It's a 5-year pause on all construction of prisons and jails that gives communities that are fighting new prisons and jails that are currently about to be built or possibly be built, the opportunities to just woosah and figure out how we can shift investments from prisons and jails and into communities that are over incarcerated. And that's a really important bill, especially for Vermont right now. I am based in Roxbury, and we are also actively fighting a new women's prison that is being built, and this is one of our strategies. And so as we build solidarity and we launch our Free Her campaign in Vermont, we are leading with the folks that are on the ground to say that we don't need a new women's prison and to really push for a prison and jail moratorium bill and beyond, which includes drug decriminalization, sex decriminalization, medical parole, elderly parole, clemency, pardon, all of the beyond, that really gives women the pathway to come home. I mean, in Vermont, we have 95 women that are currently incarcerated, and there's no reason why we can't create an exit plan for each of those women. And through the National Council, through the Free Her campaign, we are working on creating an exit plan for each of those women. And we're also shifting the narrative in the community to let people know that this is possible. And we need to stop responding to poverty, mental health, and substance use with incarceration and start to really give people the tools that they need so that way they can heal and advance in their life. And so that's the framework that we work from. We know that, I know Sister Virginia mentioned, policy, and we love policy. We love reimagining communities, the Free Her campaign. But at the end of the day, there's no legislation, there's nothing that can overpower the power of the people. And if we start to invest in the people, and I loved how you love the slogan of building up people, not prisons, because that slogan came from Danbury, that came from the sisters inside. That's a true quote from women, from mothers, from grandmothers that were really inside, spending decades away from their children, that were like, hey, we don't need these prisons. We need to invest in our people. And so I'm really excited to just, launch the campaign in Vermont. and figure out how we bring our sisters home and what does that look like, and figure out how we can build up the infrastructure of reimagining communities. Reimagining communities is not just the infrastructure that we created, it's a people's infrastructure that was created through a 2.5-year listening tour from across the country, as Sister Virginia talked about. It's inclusive of transformative justice, participatory defense, participatory budgeting, and the Liberation Project. And these are all tools that we feel that if the community, my mom always says, the best way to put something together is to get it running like a well-oiled machine. So if we put these components together and got it operating like a well-oiled machine, we can really see what a healthy, thriving community looks like, because we know that no prison, jail, or police can create a healthy, thriving community. Only healthy, thriving people can create healthy, thriving communities. And so that's why no legislation, nothing is above investing in the communities and investing in the people.
Wow. So can I ask a question? So you, in your imaginations for our community, then you would, as a long-term goal, abolish all prisons? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's the goal. Our goal is to end incarceration of women and girls.
Yes,
and
right.
so our focus right now is to end incarceration of women and girls. Which, I mean, if I like to say, we're fighting a beast right now, and our goal is the people. So you can have 50 million prisons that you want to build. You can have still the old prisons, but we're trying to get to the space where we just stop our people from even entering those prisons. So the prisons that they want to build, we were thinking about what is it called, Sister Virginia, the Planet of the Apes. And you know how when you see the old buildings and it's all grassy because nobody's there anymore, because our infrastructure really builds up the people. And so I'm not even going to say that we want to abolish all prisons. I'm going to say we want to end incarceration of women and girls. And
I'm going to interject on her on that one. No, we're not going to be able to abolish all prisons, and so therefore, what we're planning to do here is break down the whole criminal justice system, the unjust criminal justice system. That system needs to be broke down, and it needs to be rebuilt in the right frame, in the right way, and help the people in the right way. Our system right now is corrupt, and is totally corrupt, and it's totally unjust, and there's no justice in that system. So therefore, what we're planning to do is break down that whole system. Needs to be demolished, just like you said. It needs to be demolished.
The whole thing.
We know we can't stop prisons altogether. There's always going to be some type of prison and some type of jail, but there's no need for elderly women that's 70 and 75 years old with dementia to be sitting inside of a prison, taking up $500,000 a year, looking like this, when your community is out there starving and can't even move. They're no longer, whatever crime they committed, they're no more used to the system. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get them to give us clemency for elderly, sick, survived in punishment, and long-term people. Everybody deserves a second chance, and everybody changed. And prison does not help us whatsoever. No woman needs to be in prison. Everybody needs some type of help out there. People don't commit crimes because they just want to commit crimes. There's reasons that each and every one of us commit crimes. And if our needs can be met, maybe we won't have to go out there and commit these crimes anymore.
Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, my question is, how do you prevent women from going to prison? How do you work with the community so that, within the system that is here already, we can avoid these women to go, prevent these women to go to prison? How do you work with the community for that?
Well, I think a big part of what we're doing with the Free Her campaign is this first couple of years is really trying to shift public opinion and spread awareness about how harmful the prison industrial complex is. And through that, we've been doing a lot of outreach, going to different parts of the community, talking to different people, and letting Vermonters know that this state, first of all, is even trying to build these new prisons, which a lot of people are unaware of.
Right.
And that has really helped us connect to people like you who are doing amazing work in the community, because we find that Vermont people tend to be very siloed in their work, and a lot of this reimagining communities work that could be done is already happening, and we kind of need to bridge that gap. So through our canvassing and flyering and connecting, we're really trying to bridge that gap and build the coalitions to be able to show up for women if whatever is leading them into prison, build up the programs and organizations and people that are already doing the work and put money into those places to help prevent them from going to prison and help them when they get out of prison as well. Did you want to add, Jana?
Yeah, I'll add just what Virginia and Sashi were talking about earlier about how so many people have to commit certain transgressions because their basic needs aren't being met. So many people in our own women's prison return because they lose housing or lose employment. So if we could do things like just guaranteeing a basic income, like what we're gonna launch here, making sure people have money every month to pay their bills and they don't have to end up dabbling into activities that are criminalized by the state to survive. So a lot of the pathways into prison are just because people are not getting the supports and care they need. So if we just take some of this money, like the $250 million they're trying to use to build the prison project, and put it into things like maybe like $600 rent. I don't think we have anything like that in Vermont. Or work programs. There's just so many creative ideas of what we could do with this money that would naturally cut off admissions to prison.
Even the Caroline Fund.
Right. Which I'll talk about in a minute. However, I want to make another comment and then perhaps ask a question. During the beginnings of the feminist movement here in Vermont, there were many of us who were interested in a movement called Wages for Housework. What that was an international movement to pay mothers for the work that they're already doing. The work that women do in the home is never considered work, ever. The work that they do as mothers, caretakers of the elderly, the family work that they do is actually work. It's unwaged work. But because it's unwaged and women are doing it, they don't have the money to support their families. So our theory was pay women for what they do. That is productive. In fact, it's probably the most important work in the whole society. And it yet is undervalued, it is not paid, and it's ignored. The real work that women do is totally ignored. I would guess that's a lot of reasons why women commit, I guess, if you want to call them that, financial crimes. I don't even like putting that word on what I saw women and girls incarcerated for. I was a prosecutor in the Chittenden County State's Attorney's Office, and at that time, women were put in jail for things like welfare fraud, or for bad checks, or for shoplifting, for all these crimes that were associated with poverty, that women and girls are too, at that time and now, they are not able to support themselves and their families, and yet they are doing very productive work that all societies benefit from, and yet it's undervalued and underpaid. So one of the things that I feel very in tune with you about is that let's get at the causes of these crimes, especially those crimes which are linked to poverty, and eliminate as much as possible poverty, especially for women and girls, but for everybody. I am firmly a believer in eliminating for everybody, but especially for women who are raising families. They shouldn't be poor in the first place, should they? And the other thing that I also wanted to mention was that I was also in the legislature here in the state of Vermont when welfare reform was being discussed. Y'all remember that? No. Or do you? No? Welfare, if you think about it, is payment to a single parent usually who doesn't have enough money to raise kids. But it's minimum, it's nothing, it's absolutely nothing. But at least welfare payments were given to single parents who are raising kids with not enough money to raise them in dignity or in prosperity. Well, that welfare started in 1936 as part of the Franklin Roosevelt New Deal. When I was in the legislature in the 90s, there was an attempt to cut it out. You remember all that? And those were unfortunately, the Clinton years. And I could not believe the attitude about poor women in our legislature. Yes, they should go out to work. No, we shouldn't pay them to stay home. What are they talking about? Stay home, but they're working at home. Anyway, so welfare reform cut welfare significantly. And since then, single parents, both men and women, are not really given almost any support for their work at home. That would be a big deal to eliminate poverty among women and girls if they simply were paid what they were really worth in the work that they do. Just had to, anyway, that's my spiel. Okay, sorry.
Thank you for sharing that. I think bringing up the topic of criminalization and poverty is really important. Obviously, with the capitalistic system that exists, poor people have to exist for rich people to exist. So in order for the system to keep moving, people are naturally going to be poor, and some of the symptoms of poverty are criminalized, and that leads people into prison. So how do we create remedies for those things that are considered crimes, which as abolitionists, we refer to them as transgressions? How do we...
It's a good word. Yeah.
I didn't come up with it. Sorry, but yeah, how do we decriminalize some of these things that are symptoms of poverty to eliminate how many women and girls and people that are going to women's prisons, stop them from that entryway in the first place?
What do you think? How do we do it?
But how do you deal with, crime anyway? There are, transgressions, but there's also crimes that I won't say needs to be punished, but, needs to be addressed. I mean, in a form of punishment or,
Does it?
I don't know.
Does it? Is there a necessity for punishment?
No, I mean, maybe that's not the word, but
Well,
you have
like to say accountability.
Accountability.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So what we kind of envision is, yes, some people will need long-term supports that will have to be in some kind of facility, but that facility doesn't have to be prisons.
Okay.
It could be a wraparound community center with case managers, harm reduction experts, therapists, people that can really wrap folks up in love and get to those root causes of why those transgressions are happening, instead of us just keeping them in a cage for an ungodly amount of time, releasing them with no supports and expecting the best case scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Punishment.
No. I guess, we all have to change our, lexicon when it comes to crime and
yeah, absolutely.
Right. Number one, but there's two aspects of prison, right, that our society says are necessary. One is rehabilitation. But prisons don't really do a good job of that in the first place. Yeah. But the second, our society demands punishment. That's why I took you up on that word. Should people be punished by jail in the first place? Should they be? Because the long sentences, they certainly don't do anybody any good. A long sentence, which always is punitive. Okay, what about a life sentence? That's punitive.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we need to isolate people from society? Maybe, but do we need to punish them?
Exactly.
I don't know that. I don't know. What do you guys even think about that? Should people be isolated from society?
I think what that isolation could look like is in those community centers where it's not complete isolation, where they're in a room, where they're not allowed to leave, where their family is coming every day, where there's more than visitation for 1 hour, they can have phone calls, all the things, where it doesn't feel like they're totally removed from society. And getting away from the idea of punishment as a response to harm is one of the main things abolition tries to do. We're really trying to replace the foundation of society. Like, the United States has been a genocidal, murderous, racist country since its inception. So we're just trying to really replace those roots with ones of love and care. And it's hard because society has taught us for years, like, they're wrong, punish them, revenge, retribution, like that's everywhere in our media. So that's like what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Especially now.
Mm-hmm.
It's really
And
bad.
indoctrinated into our psyches, which I think is like a really big part of what Jaina is saying. We have to learn how to branch out of what we've been taught to address harm, and as governed people, figure out how we want to address harm and help people hold people accountable when transgressions take place. And like you said, like it's the lexicon of these words like crime or criminal are so deeply ingrained into our brains, but we have to practice using different words to bring the humanity back into the idea of being incarcerated. It's so easy to label somebody as a criminal and then dehumanize them when these are people that are dealing with these traumas and harms when they go to prison. Oh, sorry.
No, that just brought up a really important thought that our leadership always stresses to us about this false binary of victim and perpetrator, and I think that is important for our conversation. A lot of folks that have committed violence, their introduction to violence was not committing it. Someone committed it to them first. So a lot of perpetrators we see were victims in childhood or victims later in their life, and their trauma went unmanaged and unhealed, and it manifested in the form of them committing harm. So I think if we can just interrupt these cycles of violence, then we can really move away.
Oh, yeah. It looks like, because like our society is like a huge elephant that you can't stop, from going to crash. It looks like we have to wait for the crash to change anything. Could we change something? Because like it's the whole system, capitalism. I don't understand why in a country that is the mightiest country in the world, a country that has, the wealth that is here has never been seen in the whole history of mankind, but yet kids have to pay for college. People have to pay like huge amount of money to get, health care. All this pressure, I'm pretty sure, can be also linked to, crime, and ultimately. So can we deconstruct the whole system?
Necessary, isn't it?
Yeah, and putting money into the right places. Like our Burlington High School is currently in the middle of the old mall, and the state is simultaneously thinking about or proposing to plan a $250 million prison. So it's like, what do they prioritize here in Vermont? We do need to think about how do we build people up and put the money in that mission.
And what Kalia was saying to you earlier about how capitalism enforces this individualism, these silos, so we're not kind of encouraged to be in community with each other. And also getting back to your question of how society has purposely taught us how to not handle our own problems, how to not engage in conflict with each other. So we don't have the tools to work out problems without the police, without prisons. So if we start building up some of those skills in our communities, that's how we can start interrupting these cycles, in my opinion.
But all of the three of you have used the word capitalism, but and which is I agree with. I agree that capitalism needs to be absolutely restructured and fundamentally altered. However, there are deeper problems of violent systems, and that is racism. That existed before capitalism. Sexism also. Violence against women has existed really from the dawn of time. And I don't know how you deal. I think I could find a better way out of capitalism than I could about these fundamental creations of other people in certain people's minds, that they're others and that they can be, and violence can be committed against them. Think about violence against women. It's always been. And what do you? I don't want to get into what you should do with a perpetrator, except to say that you're absolutely right that that fundamentally human beings have got to use their head to change themselves. That there's no reason that people should be reasonably so violent against each other. How do you convince them not to be?
Well, like Virginia said earlier, I don't believe no one just wakes up and decides to commit transgressions. People are often led to do these things because of trauma. Some of the things we've already stated, symptoms of poverty, trauma, mental illness, and those are the things that we need to be addressing at the root causes. I also think to talk about the how, with this campaign, we're trying to build the infrastructure of what it can look like to end incarceration for people in women's prisons starting in New England, because the population of people in women's prisons is smaller in this region comparatively to other places in the country. So it's easier to build that solidarity and work to meet that goal. However, in Massachusetts, they have been working towards, they've already implemented a handful of Reimagining Communities programs. So I think Sashi is a really good person to talk to about how we can actually do this and what that could look like, as they've already practiced some of those things. Sashi, do you want to talk about some of the Reimagining Communities programs?
Yeah, so I really appreciated, Jana, when you were talking about giving people the tools. And when I talked about reimagining communities earlier, I mentioned the infrastructure that we could literally pick up and put in different communities. But when you pick those when you pick up those components and put them into the different communities, and you're actually on the ground with the people that are directly impacted by incarceration, and you're, living, the everyday experiences that your community members are living and experiencing, you're able to start pinpointing what does different look like for your neighborhood. And so, for an example, in Massachusetts, one of the number one reasons why women end up incarcerated is because they don't have access to affordable housing. And I mean, we could talk about affordable housing across the board, because even in Vermont, women are going to jail because they don't have affordable housing. Women are going to jail because they can't feed their families.
Right.
I mean, poverty is the same across the board, no matter what state we're in. And so in Massachusetts, 82% of those women are actually mothers. And so when you talk about mothers not having access to affordable housing, you're now talking about children not having access to affordable housing. And you, as a mother, I'm a mother. I'm sure y'all heard my daughter in the background run by screams. But you will do the most vulnerable to provide for your child and make sure that your child is able to sleep safe at night. And as a state that is willing, I know in Vermont it costs about $99,000 a year to incarcerate a woman. Why wouldn't we be exploring options of just providing women with housing? And so one of the programs that we launched here this year was basic housing. Where we pay women's rent for 1 year. And it's a pilot project. We're like, okay, let's see if you're able to like save money. Maybe you can save that, $25,000 at the end of the year, and maybe that's a down payment to a house. And now you're creating generational wealth within your family, because you might be the first family that has ever bought a house. And then we have basic income guarantee, which is we give, and it's coming to Vermont, and I'm really excited about that. But we give 5 women, that is a part of 27 women through our national work. But we give 5 women $500 a month. And it's no strings attached. I mean, when we talk about welfare and EBT and getting funding from the system, we also have to be inclusive of the fact that they monitor this. So you can't make above a certain amount of money and to receive those benefits. So it's like you're already struggling, and then you have to another barrier of struggle just to receive some type of help. Where do we start to really figure out how do we end the struggle, and how do we allow people to actually create a healthy living lifestyle? And so through basic income guarantee, we don't ask questions like that. We're like, here, sis, take this $500 a month. If you want to pay your rent, buy groceries, do what you have to do with the money, and that's your money. And then we just landed our hydroponic farm, which is the second of our 3. The first one is in Pittsburgh. The second one is in Roxbury. And I, again, live in the most incarcerated corridor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which ironically is the Black and Brown community. And I don't think that's by accident. I know that's not by accident. But we are now formerly incarcerated women, directly impacted women. I am a child of formerly incarcerated parents. we are going to be able to teach community members to grow their own vegetables. And then in addition, we'll be giving vegetables to community members. And so I was thinking the other day about how when we're also leading, trying to get police details from the police and give those detailed jobs to civilians, so that way people can actually have dignified income and provide for their family without causing harm. But I was thinking about how at the hearing, the first thing that the police opened up with was that there was about 6 shootings that happened the night before. And I get it. I live in a community where I know shootings happen. Transgressions are going to happen every day, but police are only showing up after. We're creating the tools and the resources to prevent what is happening. And that's the most important, that's the key component to all of what we do in the community, because we want to prevent people from causing harm. And, when we talk about incarcerating a woman, we're missing opportunities to figure out why they even cause harm. Because, this is a cycle. And these same transgressions are happening over and over and over again. But we're not getting to the root issue of why they're happening. What could have been in place so that way the sisters are not causing harm? And that is the important part. And that's what it means to put the people first. And so that's, like I said, reimagining communities is an infrastructure that could be picked up and put in different neighborhoods. But when you get on the ground, you start to listen to the ground and listen to the land. My mom's always like, pay the land the respect. You listen to the people, and the people will tell you what they need and they want. And that's how you create the programs of reimagining communities, because it's going to support the people.
I want to bring in, the issue of mental health and how, that also play a big part in, the rise of crime or, crime. But how do you work with mental health, professionals? Do you have any component of when it comes to mental health in your programs?
We don't have any Reimagining Communities programs outside of the basic income program that is coming to Vermont, which is very exciting. So we're very much in this first phase of reaching out to people in the community to come with us and build a coalition of skills and interests and fields of expertise. So through this type of outreach, we're hoping to connect with mental health professionals and people who are trained in emotional support to be able to build those programs and provide those things for people who are formerly incarcerated and incarcerated.
Our vision is to building this out. It's a distributive organizing model for the Free Her campaign. So hopefully we will have working groups for every type of person, like social workers, therapists, teachers, and they'll be autonomously working on what they can do to bring abolitionist policies into their field of work. But this is so important because in Angela Davis's book, Are Prisons Obsolete?, she mentions that prisons are the largest providers of mental health care in the country. So there's so many folks.
Should she call it that, mental health care?
Yeah, like, it's not care, but they're providers because they're not in their correct facilities, not getting the correct treatment. So many people are arrested during mental health crises, so this is important.
But it's also, I think, important to understand that mental health is also a product. Mental health disturbances are a product of an already broken society. So putting people in jail for mental health is it's absurd.
Yeah.
It's totally absurd. But if you think about how mental health problems are treated in this society, that isn't so great either, because usually it's done by medication, and medication often makes. I'm not going to go what I think about medication, but it doesn't really. I worked at the state hospital in when we had a state hospital, and we committed people who were mentally ill. I worked at that hospital, and the care in that hospital was simply medication. It wasn't therapy, really. I don't know how we solve the mental health problems of a society that is deeply broken. Certainly not by jail, but I'm not certain that the common treatment either is doing very much, Anyway, so you're on to it, it seems to me, by trying to reimagine a decent society. And right now, I'm glad of your imaginations. Anyway, but I really am hopeful that we could all be successful at this, first of all. But when I think about mental health, it's just, I mean, look around you at the people that you see in the streets that are homeless. It's clear to me that they're mentally ill. I don't know what we do for that. What are we going to do?
For me personally, I feel like what I've been taught a lot through my abolitionist journey is that we really have to hold each other with a much larger amount of love than we ever have.
Yeah.
Like people on the street, you need to love them like that's your sister. And we have to get to the point where if we see someone in crisis, we're going over to them and offering them help once we have the skills, you know. But it's like we have to be deeply invested in each other's lives and healing to be able to get to a decent reimagined society. It's not just that the structures are lacking, the relationships are lacking too.
Yes, true. But those relationships are, I think, also the product of a broken society. Also, I mean, I think our communities are really need a lot of attention. Put it that way. You know.
I agree. Just to add on to what Jana was saying about really needing to hold our community members in love, I think that the mental health institution as we know it, like you were saying, is often treated with medication.
Yeah.
So just, I think that could need some dismantling and reform within itself. So the way in which we could go about addressing mental health issues, it needs to be a lot more humanistic and emotional based. And I'm not a mental health professional, so I don't want to speak too much about that, but I know that the approach does need to be a lot more compassionate and empathetic and with love and providing that space for humanity to be there instead of labeling people with, you know, the disorders and things as we know them from the DSM.
And how do we deal with the problems? I'm sorry. Somebody else? Sorry.
I wanted to. I just wanted to.
You're breaking up, Sasha. Maybe you need to turn your camera on.
Yeah, it's her audio.
Yeah.
Uplift also. Like there. Can y'all hear me?
Now.
Can you hear me?
Now.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's so many levels of different of mental health. And you know, there's so, you know, and I always go back to reimagining communities because that's exactly what transformative justice is learning. When we don't learn how to interact with people, we're causing harm, no matter what level of mental health it is. But I want to get to the space of like incarceration and prison, and how prison causes harm to women that have been incarcerated, and how like that's like you, when y'all were talking earlier, talking about like punishing women, the system should not be punishing anybody. We should, and that's why it's failing. We're not, like, why are you punishing people? We need to figure out, what did you need so you didn't cause harm? What did you need so you're not doing welfare fraud or you know, causing harm to an actual human being? And so we one of the most beautiful projects that we are launching and that we're raising $1.5 million to actually build out for is the Free Her Retreat Think Tank Center. And this is not only this is going to be a land that we inherited that is on Martha's Vineyard in Oaks Bluff, but this is going to be a retreat center that women formerly incarcerated and directly impacted can go and focus on their mental health and woosah and do research and just think and cook and eat and be and live. And this is things that we're not allowed to do in our community, especially women that come home from prison. I mean, when my mother came home from prison, she, first of all, my little brother was 5 months when she went to prison, and she was still breastfeeding. And then when she came home from prison, it was just obstacle after obstacle, just to get a job, just to, you know, satisfy her probation officer. It was just so many obstacles. She's never gotten a moment to just take a deep breath and be a mother and just be, even if she doesn't want to be a mother, because I'm sure she's tired of us, but, you know, just to exist. And the Free Her Retreat Think Tank Center is a perfect opportunity and a perfect space for women and girls to have that woosah space and feel safe and feel like they can think, they can use their imagination. And so we are selling t-shirts to raise this money. So if you want a beautiful Free Her Think Tank t-shirt, you can go to the website, freeherthinktankinstitute.com. Is it .org? And and support that. But I also want to say, and this is what makes me so connected and realize why we need centers to help us as we ground out our mental health in the community. When in Massachusetts, when police need a break or they feel overwhelmed or they witness a murder or anything, there's a academy that they can go to, and they get meals cooked for them. They get to watch farm animals. They get to milk cows. They get to just watch TV and like stay away from their family and just like take a few days to just like debrief. Imagine if we gave that opportunity to community members. Take a deep breath. If you don't want to, I have a toddler who runs around crazy all day long. Imagine if I was able to get 3 days, I would be amazing. I'll be, hey, come give me a hug. And people need that opportunity to debrief and woosah. And it's so sad that only the police and prison people are getting those resources. Community members need those resources. So support the Retreat Think Tank, because this is going to be groundbreaking to allow women and girls to have a space that's safe.
Sounds like paradise.
You can look at, will you plug the website one more time, Sashi? We're selling t-shirts in order to fund our...
Where are those t-shirts then? Okay.
Okay, but
wait a minute. I want to ask you something honestly.
I think Sashi might have put it in the chat.
Okay, is the think tank on Martha's Vineyard? Is that what you said?
Yes, it's in Oak Bluffs.
At Oak Bluffs. Everybody know the history of Oak Bluffs?
So go ahead.
Okay, Oak Bluffs it's a community. I had 2 adopted black daughters, and in other words, I'm an interracial family. And when they were little, we were looking for places to go that were accepting of black kids. And we wanted to make sure that that would be the case for the vacation. We discovered Oak Bluffs because in history, Oak Bluffs on Martha's Vineyard was an abolitionist camp during slave times.
Oh my God.
And so black people were always part of Oak Bluffs. Unlike, for instance, Edgartown, which is all white. Oak Bluffs is an integrated, very integrated black community that's been in existence since the time of slavery. So it's interesting. Is that where the think tank is?
Yes.
Great, wonderful.
That's perfect.
And not that far from the beach.
Yes, I know. It's a great place. It's a great place.
Sandy, I want also to bring in the idea of, really thinking about, our society, for example, giving, in Europe, for example, mothers have like some money or resources to have their kids taken care of, like childcare. Right. I don't understand how can childcare be a big issue in a country that can send billions of dollars to a war in Ukraine. Because a mother who is like overwhelmed by kids that are running around can go cuckoo and maybe commit something. So
they can certainly go cuckoo.
Start with these things like that are basic human rights, I think. Mm-hmm. Education.
But I think you're overestimating Europe in a lot of ways.
No, it's not Europe only, because Europe has the same problem. Right, it's everywhere in the world that, in some societies, like you were saying, that women should be given money even to do the work that they're doing as a mother,
Absolutely.
Or if they want to work, we need to provide them with a way to take care of the kids. Right now, there's a spike of crime, and I want to talk about it, in the new American communities. And
that's
unfortunately,
what was reported, yeah.
The media are, and then it's dangerous because the way the media are portraying the situation is like crime comes from the new American communities without giving any background, without telling that, the mothers that are coming from these refugee camps have seen horrors. And then they come here. I'm not saying that, there should be some kind of too much of positive discrimination towards them, these women. But if you go recruit diversity for the sake of having diversity, because it looks like Vermont is so ashamed of being a white state, the whitest state, that will have to have diversity at any cost. Okay, if you go there, you have to know that, you have to accompany these people with mental, health, care. You have to give them the means to know the new society they're living in, so that, the kids won't be. But the kids that I've seen 10 years ago going to Burlington school, high school, a lot of them don't graduate. They live in the peripheries of our society. And then we're so happy because we just gave them, a job. They were in a refugee camp. They couldn't even work. Now they have a job. And then even the associations that are taking care of them are just flooded with clothes, with food, not a single book, not a single, you know what I mean? So we have to look at those things before holding like the BIPOC and the new American communities as, the bedrock, the cradle of crime in this here. Right. Mm-hmm. There is a reason for that. Right. Otherwise, it's like taking them to be lynched.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, and what's really problematic about the way Vermont is framing the uptick in violent crime committed by youth, especially new American youth, is we're not considering the fact that what you're saying, these kids are coming from countries where they saw war, they probably lost family and friends, and now they're across the world from their home. We're not taking in any of those things. We're just throwing them into our systems, expecting them to assimilate, instead of giving them the resources they need to feel whole in themselves and their culture in Vermont. So all of that, in my eyes, is just racist propaganda to try to justify building a juvenile facility, or a juvenile jail, which the state has also been very aggressive about.
Could I make a comment about that, unless somebody else has something?
I was just going to add one thing, that, I believe that this notion of scapegoating new Americans for the idea, or for the trend of new violent crime in Burlington, is just a way to scapegoat them and talk about the funding that was taken away from the policing. It's all an agenda, and it's a very racist one. So it's disturbing and disheartening, and I think that the work that we're doing here and spreading awareness and talking about the PIC and how incarceration affects people, it can open the minds and hearts and hopefully fight against those types of narratives that the media is trying to push. I'm sorry, Sandy, you can add.
No. I just want to add something about the building in which I work. I work at the Association of Africans Living in Vermont, where I have an office space. And this is what I've seen, and this is why this topic is so interesting to me about the incarceration of women and girls. I'm an attorney, and I represent largely people in the family court. So when I go in every day to AALV, I see women, single mothers, black and brown mothers, who are absolutely overwhelmed by their responsibilities. They are from, as Eric said, refugee camps. They've seen war, they've seen corruption, they've seen everything that you could possibly see. Many of them, however, and this is heartbreaking for me, have never been in a classroom in their lives. So now they're in this country. Women, I'm talking about mothers of our community with very large families, sometimes 9 children. Many times they've been deserted by their husbands who leave. I'm not going to make big judgments about it, but in my heart I do, because these women have been left alone in this community, and the community neglects them. They have no money, they have no skills, not because of them, but because they were uneducated, both in their home countries and largely here. They have very few language skills, and yet they're bringing up the future generation of this, I was going to say miserable state, but I won't go there because it's not a miserable state. It's an okay place. But right now, the state and the city has simply neglected these mothers. And yet we expect them to be able to control their children with 9 kids, no money, no real education. And they are responsible for bringing up our future children, our most valuable I mean, this is the future generation. We're leaving these women on their own. It is shocking. To me, that's the crime. That's the crime.
So Sandy, I think it's about time to wrap up. Yeah, we still have.
No.
Oh, we still
No,
have
we
time.
have time.
Okay, all right. So, is there any?
Okay, because we have more time.
All right. Okay.
So I wondered if you could. I mean, does anybody know about even these mothers in our community?
I've only really heard your story.
My rap.
Yeah, and it's, but I mean, I grew up in Burlington, and I remember maybe I was in 2nd or 3rd grade when we had a large influx of people coming from different various African countries. Many of them were refugees, and just living amongst them and seeing the different cultural differences and how even teachers and in the school it was so easy for them to just be placed in a different classroom or just left below the wayside. So it's not surprising, although disheartening, to see 20 years later that this is the trends that have taken place. Yeah.
Right. It's worse. But if you think about the neglect of mothers, period, all throughout our society, white, brown, and black mothers, especially poor mothers, and especially black and brown mothers, it's a historic crime, I believe, to ignore that most valuable part of our society is the ignorance about mothers. I mean, if a single father is in the same situation, of course, I have the same sympathy for that person. But what I see are largely 95% women, often the victims of domestic violence, often the victims of rape, especially during the wars. And that our community doesn't know this. They don't even know about it. It's really shocking to me.
Yeah, it's horrendous. And then to think that they could potentially do something that is criminalized, and be led into prison. CRCF, which I don't know, I'm sure some people are aware of the whistleblowing that took place in 2019 and all of the horrible things. VT Digger put out a couple of articles about CRCF and broke the silence about just rampant sexual violence that's taking place.
In prisons?
The building in CRCF specifically, the one prison in South Burlington.
And on parole. Parole officers are, we don't have to go into
people being supervised by the DOC were dealing with a lot of violence and sexual assault and harm. And
in the prisons.
Yeah, and it shows even more so how trauma oftentimes leads people into prison, and then prison is just another traumatic place. Yeah. And the state wants to build these 4 new prisons because, like, oh, well, you know, the CRCF drains and showers are gross and how everything's infested. Let's just build this beautiful new prison and put them in there. But you can build a new prison, and that doesn't change the culture of harm of incarceration in general. So I think it's really important that we don't construct these new prisons despite the condition that CRCF is in, and like
CRCF, you mean Chittenden County Correctional
Facility.
Okay,
yeah,
right.
It's just easier to
I know
to say it that way, but find exit plans for the people that are incarcerated there and start to decarcerate the prisons that we have. It's just building a new prison and expanding the carceral state even more, putting more money into it makes no sense. There's no legitimacy to this system. I feel like I'm going on a tangent now and kind of
That's fine.
leading away from your initial question, but yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay, anyone else? Do you have any questions, by the way, from our audience? Or comments? No?
You can wrap up.
Okay, what?
I guess just to end it there, we would love to have anybody who's interested in us in the community who wants to get involved in our campaign. Please feel free to reach out to us. Maybe we can plug an email or something somewhere. Like Sashi said, we are selling T-shirts at thefreeherinstitute.org, which I believe was put in the chat.
I'd like to get one.
Woo! And if you'd like to come to any of the Free Her Vermont events, we have an event page, which I'm gonna butcher, so I'll just add it in the chat before you all leave. But that's a great way to stay updated on the Free Her campaign, which is New England wide. We have weekly town hall meetings, which are every Monday at 6 p.m. They're virtual, so you can just log in from home and listen to what we have going on and help us build this New England solidarity. And we hope that people from all walks of life and all fields of interest can get involved, because everybody really has a role and everybody has a lift in order to help heal our communities.
Can I talk a little bit about the Caroline Fund before we end?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to end it. I just want to make sure I throw that out there.
One of the reasons that I'm here is also because in 1998, my daughter, Caroline, who was an African-American daughter at age 30, was murdered by her white boyfriend, and he was, of course, incarcerated eventually. And but at that time, Caroline was the kind of a young woman who kind of fell through a lot of society's cracks. And she had been educated. However, at a very early age, she got into drugs herself, and she was in prison for also a year and a half. And then when she got out, she kept on getting in trouble, particularly and very connected to men who were violent. And one of those men killed her in 1998. At that time, my family put together a fund because we sort of recognized that a woman like Caroline needed often emergency assistance with funds. And so we received donations, and one of the jobs of the Caroline Fund is to help women and their families when there is an immediate crisis. So if their lights are turned off, or if they have a dental problem that needs to be fixed, or they need a security deposit for rent, the Caroline Fund pays for that. And I wanted to mention that as a resource for women and their families, so we do include men in those grants. We can also be reached by getting in touch with me, essentially. And my phone number is 802-355-4968.
All right.
Okay, but we didn't even say goodnight.
I want to be able to put our event page in the chat, but I didn't prepare prior to. So we will work on that.
All right.
Okay, so maybe you guys could say goodnight or something?
Yeah. Sure.
Well, thank you so much for everyone. This has been a great conversation on abolition, and I feel like conversations like this in community are essential to getting to the place where we want to go. So thanks for your time and energy.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. I really appreciate. Thank you, Virginia and Sashi, for coming
Yes, thank you,
and
Virginia,
helping
Sashi.
to elevate this conversation in such an amazing way. I appreciate all of the work that you do and taking time to join us. And we will see you soon.
And thank you all for polishing a little bit my lexicon. Punishment will disappear. We'll abolish the word punishment. Punishment. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.